So this is a pep talk video for anybody that is starting their own SaaS product or just doing it all by themselves or with a small team. If you are a full stack developer, if you are a jack of all trades working on all aspects of the product, I know that it can be very rewarding, but also very daunting. There's always the urge to grow, right? Every product business seems to have the objective of growing their staff, of getting enough funding or bootstrapping their way where they can be a bigger company. So I want to talk to you a little bit today about why you might not want to do that, what the advantages are if you are a full stack developer, if you are a jack of all trades. Why would you maybe want to think about never growing your company to something very large, to keep it very small? So I think one of the primary reasons to not grow is the fact that as you grow your staff, the amount of time you need to spend on things that aren't about the product starts to grow. That means having more process, having more checks and balances around your development cycles, having to get more people on the same page about what's being developed, how it's being developed, having to coordinate between different people, or as you grow between different departments. All that stuff, all that time becomes overwhelming. It becomes the majority of the time you're spending. And so the actual time you're doing real development starts to dwindle and dwindle. And so, for me, I've always looked at development, design, all this stuff as an art form. I liken it more toward the process of making music or writing a story. It's artistic to me. And you lose that sense of artistry, that real sense of craft when it becomes a larger team that you're working with. Then it becomes much more process and operations oriented. So for me, that is something that I can't give up. And so that's one reason I'd advocate to stay small. Okay, so what does that actually mean in terms of how things are different? So at DoneDone, when we start a new feature, we don't do it in the typical way of a larger organization where you might have a planning phase that involves the design team to design some sketches of what this feature is going to look like. And then there's all sorts of meetings to figure out, distill all that work. And then there's all the other stuff around resourcing, around timing, around who has time to do what, and getting everybody on the same page. All that stuff evaporates when you're a very small team. So when we start with a new feature, it starts with a single task in DoneDone, and often that task is not well defined. Because there's just a few of us, we generally have a good idea of what that feature is. And we can kind of hash out some of those things inside of a DoneDone task, but we don't really need to get into the specifics of the design details. That's where I will just start going in to the application and just start developing. I'll develop whatever backend services we need, any database updates, and then just start plumbing in the front end stuff as well with a stab at what the design will look like. Because we aren't working in a physical medium, this isn't like we're building a building. Software is very easy to undo. It's very easy to erase. It's very easy to modify. So we take full advantage of that. So I will get to a point where things start to feel good for me and then share it with my business partner, Michael, and whoever else might need to be involved. And then we'll just start hashing things out there. So there's very much an iterative process to how we develop that starts from the very beginning. It doesn't start after this drawn out design process. And so because we can shrink all that beginning planning phase that usually happens in other organizations, it gives me a lot more time to just start exploring, to do some experimentation, to do some explorations in the development phase. And usually we get to something pretty quick, and oftentimes something totally different than what we expected to through the course of a few iterations. The other nice result of this is that we're working inside the app. So there isn't this need to translate things from a design document into the app or to translate specifications into the app. We're starting from the application. And there's something really motivating about that. There's a sense of momentum because you're already starting on the real thing that, again, you can't do in a bigger organization where you need everyone involved and coordinated. You can just start right away on the real thing. What we also really value here, that I think we probably value more than in most larger organizations, is really good documentation. Devoting the time after a feature has been deployed, after it's launched, after it's successfully been working in the wild. In a bigger organization, the inertia to then go back in and start documenting everything that was done, especially if it was done by a lot of different hands, is hard because the feature's already out there. There's really not a lot of return on investment from the organization to spend time to write really good documentation when there's other things to build. Because we can reduce that planning time and lengthen our development time, it also gives us time to at the back end do more documentation. So I've already have a video out about how I use diagrams for documentation. I think it's a really good visual way to document things well. The other great thing about working all over the stack is that I think it keeps you more fresh. So if you are developing an entire feature by yourself, the ability to work on the front end for a bit, move to the back end, move to any database architectural changes you need. I love that fluidity from which you can move from one end to the other, because at times you might just get stuck in a bit of a rut, or you might find some fatigue from working in one particular layer, and you can move on to something else that feels fresh again. And so I think that ability to move around the stack is actually very helpful, and it keeps you in your zone. And I think that's a huge bonus that you can't have when you are a larger team and developers are more siloed into their particular pieces of work. The efficiency gains you get out of being able to move around the stack are immense. Another reason to stay small is I think your code base benefits. You can maintain cleaner code, more consistent code when it's just you or it's just a couple people developing. In an organization that's larger, where you've had a number of hands come in and out, people have left, new people have come on board, it's really hard to maintain that consistency of code. You are also able to do refactors when you want to. You don't have to bring it up to the management team. In fact, one of the quotes I love from Martin Fowler, I'll paraphrase, his strategy to get the management team on board with refactoring code is just to not tell them. So when you're just doing it with yourself, you don't have to lie to anybody. Refactoring is a huge part of maintaining good, clean code, and it's something you can do without guilt, without that nagging feeling that you're kind of wasting your time on things that aren't producing new features. You get rid of that when you're a small team. Another reason I recommend not growing is that it makes you grow as a developer, as a designer, as a thinker. The things that you might normally hire for that you take on yourself now gives you just a greater tool set from which you can work with. And it lends itself to feeling more empowered, feeling like you can do more. And you also get a really good sense of how quickly and how amazingly quickly you can do things when it's just you, when the friction of having a lot more people to work with goes away. It's all replaced with your own ability to do things, your own ability to go at your own pace, and you'll be surprised at how fast that pace can be. Now, of course, there are huge advantages to having a larger staff, to having more people be able to do things, to take on work. If you are just going at it on your own in the beginning, or if you just have a small team, how do you overcome just the sheer number of hands that a larger team has? One of the best ways to do that is to write your own tools. And one of the best kinds of tools that I recommend looking into is to write your own code generation tools. One of the things you realize as you get more familiar with your own product is just how much of the code along the stack is stuff that I would classify as tedious and trivial. So tedious in that it's just kind of you're writing the same sort of plumbing code, but trivial in the sense that you know exactly what it is. There's really not a lot of creativity involved in it. Something like Ruby on Rails, a lot of its underpinnings are rooted in code generation, in being able to describe models and then have all this other scaffolding and all these other things generated from that. You can do the same thing with your own code, whether you're using a framework like that, or in my case, I use a .NET backend and a Vue.js frontend. I can write generators to essentially create the API connection between the Vue frontend and the .NET backend, because if I'm writing the .NET backend, all of the objects and all of the requests and all of the responses that I need on the front end are essentially trivial to me. I know exactly what they're going to be because I've written out the API methods on the back end. The amount of time that is saved by having a code generation tool basically be able to quickly and rapidly rebuild code based on your other code is immense. And the best part is you're not having to hire another person to do that work. And a a code generator is going to be 100% accurate all the time, as opposed to a human being that's going to make mistakes. So when you can take away the tedious, trivial stuff that is really better suited for some sort of automation tool versus a human being, that saves an incredible amount of time. So those are just a few of the reasons and some of the approaches I take. If you're interested in not growing your business from a people standpoint, but growing your product, I think there's just huge advantages to your own personal growth, and to just fulfillment, to just feeling empowered, to actually enjoying the work you do. This is an industry that is just so enamored with growth on all scales, in terms of people, in terms of financial projections, all that sort of stuff, when in reality, a lot of us here are doing it for, at least partially, for the craft, for the enjoyment of the art, of software development, of design. And that's something that I think is a sad thing to lose. And it's very easy to lose and get caught up in some of the other extraneous stuff in this industry. So I hope you enjoyed this little talk, and hope that helps you out and helps you make decisions around not growing your company in the future.